And I think what makes it so difficult is that we are our own best critics. And so when it comes to trying to choose reference letters, there's often this mental war where we think, oh, should I choose this reference letter over that one? And well, I said that like really awkward thing during rounds, or like I like went into the bathroom with my preceptor, like will they hate me forever? So lots of things like that can plague your judgment.
Welcome to Specialty Café, a podcast by the Royal College that helps you, medical trainees, choose your chosen specialty. My name is Mark Garabedian, a fourth-year medical student at McGill University, and I'm thrilled to be joined today by a former host and current R1 in internal medicine, Cameron Wong. Welcome, Cameron.
Thanks, Mark. Thanks so much for having me.
Yeah. I'm really excited. You've been on the other side of this in my shoes, a great mentor to me while I was kind of getting onboarded with the podcast. I'm really excited to kind of chat with you about your experience with the match last year and any advice that you can give me who's currently going through the process.
The day had to come for you, but as I'm sure you're feeling going through it, it is a stressful process, but I'm very happy to talk about my personal journey through the entirety of CaRMS, even before CaRMS, after CaRMS, and give any piece of advice that might be helpful.
Yeah, sweet. That's actually brings us to our first question. So can you maybe walk us through your overall approach to choosing a specialty during med school? Why internal medicine? Was it something you always wanted, something you discovered late on?
Tough question. And a question you basically have all 4 years or 3 years of medical school to answer. I knew I wanted internal medicine from a very early point in medical school. I was very interested in like the academic contents of pre-clerkship, particularly like the organ-based systems, cardiology, respirology, endocrinology, and nephrology. And when I saw that translated, when I did some observerships and I saw people nerding out and using the actual like concepts that we learned in class, like, oh, this is our approach to AKI, this is our approach to like heart failure and like putting things together, it very much felt quite satisfying to me. And when I did it again in clerkship in my CT rotation, I had a phenomenal time just being a part of like that team environment and then also getting to nerd out among other people. So that was my approach, is that I found out that I liked the classroom content, and then I went forward and confirmed it during clerkship. But in terms of like if, for example, you haven't determined like the specialty that you necessarily want to during medical school, wherever you are, then the common distinctions that I hear people recommend like going down is, do you want medicine? Do you want surgery? What kind of lifestyle do you want to live? Do you have specific interests in organ systems? Maybe you have like personal backgrounds in fields, whether it's research related or personal as well. And I think that generally guided me and my friends to choose the specialties that we are in now for residency.
Awesome. Well, it seems like it's kind of working out so far. You seem to be happy and smiling. Kind of going through the application process, how did you kind of approach the different aspects of it? We can start with maybe personal statement, and what advice would you give medical students to who are struggling to get started on their personal statement?
Yeah, the personal statement, I would go as far to say, is the most time intensive parts of the CaRMS application. The paper part itself, maybe arguably amongst the CV part as well, though. There's a lot of personal statements you have to write. For me, I applied to every single internal medicine program in the country, so that was 24 of them at that time. And so although it wasn't 24 individual personal statements, it was a lot of writing. And so I think just like recognizing the amounts of workload you have ahead of you and then reading what is required of you. Some schools will like a traditional response, a personal statement. Some will have specific questions. Being able to organize yourself and see all the different program descriptions and what they request for the letters, that I think is the most important, because you can't really go ahead and start brainstorming or start gathering, making a structure for your personal letters if you don't know what you're writing about. So I started by doing that, and I during my rotations, I kept like a physical book, and whenever I had downtime, I would jot down ideas about what I wanted to write during my personal statement. Things like, oh, like me personally, I play a lot of oboe and orchestral music, and so I would sometimes have flash thoughts of like, oh, like this is how I could connect oboe and internal medicine problem solving wise, and then I would write it down, and then I would like kind of draft things as I go. So I would say overall, like what was most helpful to me among the other tried and true strategy of writing personal statements, like just drafting things and revising it, having friends have a look. For me, it was also just having a notebook with me and being able to like bounce ideas off of myself, like in my own time, because it was quite an extended process of writing.
Right. Okay. Would you say it's a similar kind of process for your CV, just make multiple drafts and having people review, or did you kind of choose a different approach for that?
It was very similar, you're right. Also very time intensive. I had 12 drafts of my CV once I finished doing it, and I thought I would be able to get it done in one go, but you go through it and you read the wording of some of your entries and you think, this isn't exactly what I wanted to communicate, or maybe I can showcase my impact better for certain ones. Maybe you don't need to include like some extraneous items. And so it's very much an evolving documents. At least it was for me when I went through CaRMS, but similar in that I like made a draft of it. I poured through every single item, and then I would rearrange and I would do it all over again.
Right. Okay, awesome. And maybe next week we can talk about references. I think references is one of the most stress-inducing things about CaRMS, at least for me, because it's kind of blinded. I don't know what's being written about me necessarily. Maybe have an idea, but how would you kind of how would you go about choosing, excuse me, approaching references, asking for letters, things like that?
Yeah, very difficult. And I think what makes it so difficult is that we are our own best critics. And so when it comes to trying to choose reference letters, there's often this mental war where we think, oh, should I choose this reference letter over that one? And well, I said that like really awkward thing during rounds, or like I like went into the bathroom with my preceptor, like will they hate me forever? So lots of things like that can plague your judgment. My personal approach was to go with my gut feeling of what felt best, just knowing that like I was going to tear myself apart and in trying to analyze like, oh, like which preceptor did I say the smartest things with, or like which patients did I like do the best work on like in front of like certain preceptors, and just to think like, well, for internal medicine, which preceptors were in general internal medicine, because I felt like for me, I had enjoyed my GIM rotations a lot, and I know that most people on a committee in internal medicine tend to be GM doctors, although all the internal medicine subspecialties are also like very excellent choices too. So the like kind of position of your referee can matter, and your working relationship does matter. In the context of everything I mentioned, trying to recognize that you might have those moments of self-doubt, try to like reflect and say, oh, did I really show my best lights with this preceptor, or like did we have like a good working relationship? Because if the vibe is good with a certain doctor, then chances are they'll probably write you a good reference letter. So I would say that's another really important part.
Okay.
And then I know for some programs, it's good to kind of show different sides of like yourself as like you go through different rotations and go across like different places across the country even. So for the competitive surgical specialties, likely you're going to acquire reference letters all from the same specialty, but maybe you want to obtain them from different institutions just to show that like all these different places you went, you were able to demonstrate you are an excellent member of the team. You showed that you were a hard worker, and that was corroborated by many different doctors, not just all people in the same departments in the same institution. So there's that as well.
Yeah, awesome. I think one of the things, just to follow up, actually, one of the things I currently struggle with is, asking a reference letter from someone I might have worked with, 3 or 4 months ago, who's had 10 or 15 medical students since me. Is there maybe like a certain email structure or a package that you'll send to these referees, so that they'll remember you, and so that maybe they will have something to write about in their letter?
great question. And you made me realize that another part of the CaRMS application that I spent a lot of time on were my reference letter packages. I didn't have the highest number of like preceptors I asked for references, but for them, I did make sure that I put together a very comprehensive package for them to reference if they did need to. Standard like reference letter packages that I hear people prepare include kind of just like a brief description of the rotation, some highlighted patients that you cared for, brief clinical history, and like importantly your contributions to management that might be maybe different or above and beyond. If there's any written feedback that the preceptor has written about you. Additionally, if there's any feedback that the residents have written about you, because oftentimes in team-based settings, the preceptor isn't spending like all their time with you, it will be the residents too. It can be helpful to like mention if you've gotten like evaluations and written feedback from residents, you can include that too. It's another perspective that they might not have known otherwise. So yeah, that also did take me a while, just placing everything together and being able to reflect on the patients that I cared for and think, well, like what made this difference in how I managed it than you might go by with just the guidelines.
Right. Okay. That's really helpful to know, and something I'm probably going to apply in my own life right now as I'm going through it.
One thing
Sweet.
I did. Oh, one thing I
Yeah.
did want to add, actually, now that I remembered, is like, this is particular, I guess, like for internal medicine. I guess it probably actually applies to most of the specialties. When you think about like the ways that you manage your patients, a lot of the times there can be pressure to think and say like, oh, I managed this part of like, let's say someone's heart failure presentation. I managed this part of someone's COPD presentation. Most of it is probably according to guidelines and like what you would expect for most people to do. But if there's any like psychosocial or like subjective parts that you felt like you were particularly involved in, that kind of stuff is unique. Because your relationship with the patient is not going to be the same as anyone else's relationship with the patient. I remember that like there was a patient I managed with heart failure, and I did everything kind of by the guidelines. But for me particularly, one thing I recognized near discharge is that the patient wanted a raised toilet seat at home, and she didn't. She couldn't access it, and so I just basically contacted the right people and made sure that I could organize so she could get a toilet seat at home. And so that was something that was a little bit different that I included, and I ended up talking about during my interviews too. But I would say that's what I think of when I think of like things that are just different and not just by the guidelines.
Yeah, sweet. And I think that also kind of makes you a little bit more memorable. Telling a patient that they can use kind of metoprolol to manage, their high blood pressure is one thing, but giving them actual like real concrete solutions socially, I think is very impactful, I guess. So kind of going into electives now, so maybe a little bit away from the application. How important were internal medicine electives for you, and how did you kind of decide where to do them, how many to do, given that, there's not really a maximum, and which, I guess, subspecialties to do as well?
Yeah. So in terms of how many to do of my internal medicine electives, I was very lucky because at least at the time of when I was doing my clerkship, I believe this is still the case, there was no cap to the amounts of internal medicine electives you could do because you could only do 4 electives in a primary entry specialty. For example, that might be neurosurgery or orthopedic surgery. But internal medicine kind of gives gateway to like cardiology, respirology, nephrology, all the different subspecs. And so you can mix and match with the IM subspecialties. And I did that. And so I think I did like 12 or 14 weeks of internal medicine just among the different subspecialties. And I made sure to go to the programs that I wanted to know more about, and those where I can imagine myself going. And so in particular, I went to Calgary, I went to U of A, and I went to UBC as well, because I was interested in kind of making my way out west back home. And I really was glad that I did get to do my electives at those places, because you don't know what it's like to be in a city doing medicine until you're there. Even then, like a 2-week elective is not a representative sample of what a residency would be like, but you get a good sense of like the city, you get a good sense of like what the vibes of the residency program. You start to know like a bit of the hospital dynamics, like, oh, are the hospitals like really spread apart? Are they close together? Do they have a good food court? Do they have a bad food court? Do they have like good public transit as well? Do you have supports in the city? And for me, I was very lucky because I got all of my electives in places where I had supports from family and friends. And so I never had to spend money on a hotel, which is very, very rare.
Yeah.
And I'm super glad that I was able to. So that was a major reason for me choosing electives because they're very hard and they're very stressful. You're trying to be at the top of your game every day and trying to put on a good face for everyone. So those were my guiding principles for choosing electives, just like to do as many IM ones as possible, do them in the places where I wanted to do them. And then also for me, like personally, I knew it was going to be stressful, so I scheduled them in places where I had family and friends.
Yeah, I joke that I'm starting an elective in Queens in a couple weeks, and I wish you were in my year because then I'd have a place to crash. But
It's true. It's true.
unfortunately, I'm going through that process of going through Airbnbs and things like that, and it's I can attest it's not the most fun process.
Oh, it's
Um,
not.
in terms of kind of going back to electives, what strategies did you kind of use to stand out for us for a rotation that only knows you for 2 weeks and has multiple med students kind of going in and out of the hospitals?
Hmm. I think back to the electives I was on, I don't actually know if I had that many medical students on service with me. Um, yeah, I know there's a lot of inherent pressure to try and stand out among other people. I think there's better ways to stand out and less better ways to stand out. Better ways to stand out include just your basic guiding principles of clerkship to be present, be affable, be hardworking, be ready to help out when people need, including
Hmm.
helping out your fellow medical students. Like whether in internal medicine, there's a lot of work to do. So asking if you're done your work to say, hey, like, can I help with your discharge summaries? Or, oh, like, I know like you're busy with this. Can I help like do some like put in the labs for that patient or
Hmm.
call like a service? So being like helpful will be noticed, and I think that will be very appreciated by the team. Yeah, I would say like there can be a lot of stress on electives and such. So, but as always, like try not to stand out in the way of like putting people down or like butting in during teaching sessions and such, because those also can be noticed and not in the ways that I would say people are hoping them to be noticed for. I don't really have super innovative advice there, but just to
Hmm.
kind of show up and really be a nice person to work with, and that is honestly that can honestly be more than enough. Of course, the knowledge aspect can seem very daunting to people, and while it is good to like read up on like the basic topics around like your around your rotation, like especially in internal medicine, I think like the rest of the teamwork stuff actually does matter quite a lot.
Awesome. Good to know. Sweet. And then maybe moving on to interviews. Was there any kind of resources or methods that you found that were useful in preparing for your interviews?
Interviews in my year were
Hmm.
all on Zoom. I believe they will be for your year as well. Not sure about the year after that. Mm, so a lot of the preparation I did was for virtual interview specific, uh, I guess like logistics. And so some of them including like practicing with my friends on Zoom. We would host like weekly practices. We'd go over a few questions. We kind of challenge each other. We give each other feedback in the same way that me or you like were preparing when we applied for medical school. It's actually not very different, and I would say, at least for internal medicine, a little bit easier because they tend to ask like more standard questions as opposed to the broad questions of like MMIs that you might remember in medical school. They can be a really big mixed bag. But for the purposes of virtual interviews, I would say it was important for me to like practice, exclusively on virtual platforms to use the same setup every single time to get accustomed to the space that I was practicing in. I made sure to go back home from Queens to Calgary because I knew that's where my family'd be and that's where I'd feel supported. I knew that I wanted, like in my room, the standard like ring lights that I have on right now. And then also this was my Zoom background that I used during my interviews for CaRMS. And I stole a room divider from my parents' basements and just put it up because I thought it looked uniform and I thought it looked like professional. And so whatever works for you in that aspect, other in things including making sure that like you're at eye level, not like very far down and like going in from above.
I'll fix my
Sound
posture.
quality, yeah, things like that because they do matter, and you do want to portray the best sense of yourself
Hmm.
that you can to the interviewers and give them like the chance to know you. And it's a little hard to do that if there's some other like things that are distracting from that.
Right.
Swivelly chairs as well. If you're on a swivelly chair, people tend to like go from side to side if they're very nervous.
Yeah. Yeah. Speaking of that, how did you manage your stress during the interview process?
Well, I don't know if it was. I guess I coped with it.
Hmm.
The degree of success, I don't know, questionable. I went for long walks. I made sure to like debrief with for like friends and family about like how I was feeling after the interviews. Me personally, one thing I did that I thought was a bit different, is that I journaled how I thought each interview went after every single one. And I would grade myself out of 10 and say like why it was that. And so for my like U of A internal medicine interview, I would write, oh, I thought I really liked my answer to this question. And this one was like, well, I was kind of awkward over here, but I guess that's okay. And then I would grade
Hmm.
myself like 9 or 8 out of 10, something like that. And I do that for every single one. I think that like I was always going to do that because I do like my documentation in the hospital, outside the hospital. But I also knew that it would stop me from going insane when I had to write my and rank my rank order lists
Hmm.
because I would know that, oh, actually, although now I'm feeling not so great about like interview X, I'm going back and reading my notes and seeing, oh, actually, it wasn't so bad.
Right.
And like, or like maybe the vibes of the actual interview were not so bad as I was thinking. Now
Right.
they are.
Okay.
So that helped me that way.
Good. Nice. Very very useful. Very kind of like stress management. I think is like half the battle when it comes to
Mhm.
CARMS. So it's very very useful to know kind of the ways that you can manage and um, kind of reduce your stress if that's
Mhm.
appropriate. Next, I just kind of want to end off with some pieces of advice for medical students. So first, if you can give one piece of advice to medical students preparing for the match, what would it be?
If I was to give one piece of advice for medical students preparing for the CARMS match, it would be, I would say, a tried and true piece of advice, which would be to start reasonably early and break things into uh, achievable chunks. And actually, now that I think about it, I have my old notebook from like when I was like planning for CARMS, and I called it like the CARMS like notebook. And one day I just got so overwhelmed with everything that I had to do, and I was thinking, wow, like all these tasks, all these different like reference letters I have to put together, all these different personal statements and drafts I need to send to people for review. And then I took some time to write down every single task I needed to do, things like click submits or send email to X person, write this in the CARMS portal. And I have to admit, like the actual way it looks is really overwhelming. But to me at the time, having like written it out and being like, oh, this is CARMS, like this is all of it, it actually felt okay. And this is what
Mhm.
it ended up looking like. But I would say that kind of highlights my own strategy of managing CARMS is uh, just yeah breaking it down into small very achievable things like, oh, I can send an email, I can
Mhm.
open a website and like write 15 words. It makes it less daunting, and I think that would be my biggest piece of advice.
Okay, that's good to know. And for those listening and not watching, the notebook was probably two full pages filled out. It was not. It didn't seem as daunting as Cameron made it out to be. Okay, sweet. And I think my last question is, looking back as now as a first year resident, is there anything that you would have done differently? We kind of got a sense of your process and your approach to the match. Is there anything that didn't work out for you, or that you wish you would have done a little bit differently?
It's hard to say stress less because myself, among many other people, I'm sure you included, uh, everyone has type A like dependencies, and it's so natural to stress during a process that is career determining and is the culmination of what you've been working towards in medical school. But I would say in order to mitigate that, like rely the hardest you ever have on the people that support you, people who are cheering for you, including like your family and your friends. A lot of the times they might not even know how difficult it is to go through CARMS because they've never done it, or like what you're feeling. So like, don't be alone. Share what you're feeling about it. Share if you feel like you need support, if you need that family phone call, if you need a visit, if you need to visit some friends. Um, People are in your corner,
Hmm.
and that's that I would say is something I wish I did a little bit more, is to be vulnerable and say like, oh, I'm actually not doing super great. Like, can I call you about this? Or like, can I come visit you? Or yeah, that would probably be my biggest thing that I would do differently.
Awesome. I think that's something that a lot of us struggle with doing is, being open, to me included. And, I think that's something that I would definitely benefit from in the next couple months, just kind of relying on the people that I hold close. Sweet. I think that's all I have for you, Cameron. Thank you so much for kind of giving us your insights. And, it's a lot less daunting talking to you than some of the program directors that I've been chatting with recently. So, thanks for being a friendly face on the podcast as well. And with that, once again, my name's Mark. Thank you for listening to the Specialty Café podcast, a podcast by the Royal College to help you medical learners choose your chosen specialty. Thanks, Cameron.
Thanks so much, Mark. Enjoyed chatting with you.
Yeah.